So that's very interesting to me because it almost sounds like you're describing like an optimal state of mind for engaging in magic. And I wonder if you have other thoughts about, um, from your point of view, what's the best state of consciousness to be in? What's the best attitude to bring into this in order to do magic well?
Hmm. I have an answer to that, and then I also have like a belief that I don't actually know the answer at all. Um, I do think that certain states of consciousness, the trance state, for example, is a really good one. Um, sort of psychedelic induced hallucinations, these are good ones. They're also bad ones. Um, what we need to do is kind of invite these other states of being that aren't just the productive, rational, linear. Um, but I wouldn't say any of them are the best. I just think we hyper focus on one or two that allow us to survive in a particular cultural context, when really all of them are great for it. Because, again, as Jesper Sorensen seems to state in his work, all of our sort of cognitive mechanisms are responsible for all of the ways in which we experience reality. There are no particular ones that lead to any particular outcomes, but we use all of them in different ways, and we combine them all in different ways. And I guess I would argue that the more novel ways that we can combine the different aspects of our cognition, the conceptual blending, the ability to conjure or experience images, the ways in which we can either process things top down, so to engage the mind to bring out particular uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Particular responses in the body, or to connect to the body's responses and to then infer narratives or thoughts from that. The more we can do both of those, and the more skilled we get at doing them simultaneously, I think the more grounded we will be. Although not necessarily the more transrational, just the more grounded, the more skillful, and the more calm and willing we will be to engage in these actually quite normal, although admittedly terrifying, irrational experiences. No, how about
Yeah,
yourself?
I appreciate your invocation of the plurality of non-ordinary states. There's lots of different ways to be monstrous and to go to the edges of experience outside the rational. It seems essential that we get better at having some groundedness at the center of that mandala. And often I think about that as being good at the as if state. If you can be an uncommitted full participant, that's sort of ideal. There may be some states which are frequently used, but turn out to be problematic over time. I was thinking about Star Wars, as utterly insufficient and corporate as a mythos that it turns out to be. It was for the people of the West in the 20th century the preeminent public architecture of how to evolve subtle potency under electromagnetic civilization, something like that. And it tells the tale of this war between the Sith and the Jedi, these two cults who strongly disagree about the ideal mentality for accessing the Force. Where one group believes that any passion would disrupt the clear, focused, ascetic benevolence state that they need to be in order to wield the imaginal and etheric power. And the other group believes only that intense agonies and raw egoic passions freed from the constraints of mutual consideration can tap the raw power of this force. Um, so there's different states of mind being proposed, and I think if you take Star Wars as a source of information, you see both of those strategies fail again and again and bring doom to the general civilization that's around them. So I personally um, want to sidestep the states whose attempt to access this seems to be um, contaminated, hyperbolic, exaggerated. I think there's a lot more risk in those class of cognitive states than there are in a more half and half state, more like a free roaming, partial circulating trance state. Um, I think the notion of circulation and proximity and the movement between thresholds is a symptom of neurological health. It has a philosophical future to it. I would even suspect that it is the archaic normal state for human beings prior to this, let's say, McGilchrist's left brain imbalance type civilization. That our ancestors might have had a state of waking consciousness that's closer to what we call the trance state. And when you go to a lot of people who keep up indigenous patterns of magic, it's often surprising how delicate their use of psychoactive states of consciousness is. Right? If you go in expecting it to be uh, a huge dose of LSD at a rock concert with trippy lighting, you'll be surprised that it's a puff of tobacco and some light drumming, right? So that the state that they're looking for is just off to the side of your normal consciousness. It's not some fantastic disruption of functioning. It might be a state that you don't even notice was different until after, as is often the case in hypnotherapeutic trance induction. You don't feel yourself vanish. You think you're there the whole time. It's only later you think, God, that was a really weird state. It was a state in which my focus was altered, my willingness was altered, my ability to bring things up from different levels of my being was enhanced, and my ability to find things to be salient was increased. There's a lot of talk
Mhm.
about the meaning crisis, and I don't think we have any hope of addressing the meaning crisis unless we get much better at going into states where we are open to the amplified salience of our interactions with objects, visible and invisible, entities, invisible and invisible, and parts of ourselves, visible and invisible.